Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's Tech Voices, we're talking about using generative AI to write software for business use cases. This is a process that's happening more and more, and it's having a huge effect on enterprise workflow, really changing the way companies do business. To discuss that, I'm joined by a major industry expert. With me is Bharat Sandhu, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the SAP Business Technology Platform. Bharat, really good to have you with us today.
James, good to be here.
Great. So, generative AI, we hear so much about it in the workplace. We think maybe sprinkle a little AI in the software, it makes everything better. Some of it's myth, some of it's reality. What do you see is really going on with the adoption of using generative AI to write code in the enterprise environment? Is that real?
Absolutely. I think GenAI is definitely here, and we're seeing all industry leaders talking about how much of the code is being written by GenAI, and SAP, we're doing the same thing here too, empowering the developers to do it. And if I had to kind of contrast, right, like earlier in the year, Andre Kapachi coined the term vibe coding,
Hmm.
and that kind of took a life of its own, right? And people say, hey, now you can write code by just writing prompting and all this stuff. And there's some truth to that, but frankly, where the main emphasis right now, where Gen AI is having in the industry, is actually with professional developers,
Mm.
improving the productivity of professional developers and enabling them to do much more than they could do before, and
Mm.
really tackle the backlog. So when it comes to actually empowering development teams that have been writing code for a long time in the art of software engineering, you see that really blossom now with Gen AI, and that's happening for sure. So
Hmm.
if your audience is not doing it, I'll highly encourage them to start doing it
Mm.
because the rest of the industry is doing it.
Well, it's interesting. Vibe coding. We should dwell with that on just a minute. I mean, it's voice activated, so you can actually talk to your system and say, "I want this and this," and the software is going to write the code, or at least in theory, it's supposed to work that way. Um, I mean, is it obviously should be a developer to do a little bit better? I mean, are we seeing real people that are, let's say, middle managers or sales reps? Are people like that are not dev experts really using vibe coding?
We should define. I think these terms will mature over time. So if we define vibe coding as just prompting away, whether like using keyboard or using a voice,
Hmm.
that's more in the prototype world, I would say. There's a
Hmm.
lot more that takes it to be deployed to a production app than just vibe coding away without looking at the code.
Mm.
Um, but what's happening though is with the number of people writing code has increased.
Right.
It will continue to increase. That's a good thing, by the way. If you look back, what is coding? Coding is instructing the computer to do something. So far, we've had a very declarative way of doing it. That's what programming languages are all about, from
Hmm.
C, Rust, and Python, and all so forth.
Hmm.
Uh, but we can just use natural language to also instruct the computer to do it. Now, it's a difference between having an idea and prototyping an idea to see if it's viable versus producing something that's, at least in our space, highly enterprise grade, can be deployed, maintained, and secured, and governed in any other application. And just purely vibing away, we're not there yet as the
Hmm.
industry, and we don't need to be, frankly. Where I actually frankly see is, even if we were to say put a pause on all Gen AI development today, the models are really good at producing code now. And what we need to do is really find the balance between having a developer who understands the programming language really well and enabling them, and folks who might be technically minded, right? But not writing code for a living, allow them to work together much more effectively. So that's where I actually see the future of vibe coding going,
Mm.
which is an abstraction layer, frankly, where we have technical product managers, technical product marketing, and people who are slightly technically minded can actually now produce prototypes, but those prototypes are not black boxes,
Hmm.
right? They can also get user acceptance testing and all those things going, but that produces code on the back end, right? And even some of our vibe coding tools in the industry have a dev mode now. You can go in and actually look at the code and make changes there and so forth. And that I
Mm.
think is a necessity there.
Mm.
Because it's just not the art of producing code. That is not what the differentiator is going to be. It's actually the new insights and the creativity, the problems to be solved. And writing code is no longer, I would say, be a huge differentiator unless you're
Mm.
working in the compiler space where optimization really matters,
Hmm.
right? But for the vast majority of software, code itself is not a differentiator, but the ideas are, and the ability to put that into production at large scale is where you still need and will always need
Hmm.
depth in software engineering, depth in systems thinking, depth in software architecture thinking. So those things actually will become even more important than just writing code itself. So I really see vibe coding evolving from purely being using voice to write apps, which are really more in the prototype world, to
Hmm.
actually enabling many more people to work much more effectively together to produce, to prototype much more, to test more things, but then to put things in production. So you and I can use things much more effectively.
Well, I mean, I think on that very note, I think there are plenty of companies that are doing some experimenting that they want to move into, viable productivity. How can companies do that? They want to, they know what vibe coding is, they're using it somewhat, but how can they really move it to real production grade software?
And again, like I think we should not over-index on the term vibe coding itself. So let's maybe, if I could reframe it,
Please. Yeah.
just say, hey, how do I use Gen AI
Right.
and do more with it, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that is maybe more accurate than a buzz term here and all, right?
Yeah.
Look, I think first of all, this stuff is real, right? And you have the industry leaders talking about it. You have even like people outside the tech industry, right? In finance and all using it. So our customers are using it. So if you're not using it, you got to start using it. So this is, I would say, like a few ways you want to maybe think about it. First, and I'm going to talk about software development.
Hmm.
I'm not going to talk about all the embedded AI use cases which you should light up, which you should
Yes. Right.
prepackaged. I'm talking about software development, which is
Okay.
slightly here, I'll encourage customers and your users to like start with the most professional, more advanced and senior developers.
Mm. Hmm.
People who know your code base, who know your what your systems really well, and they probably are already using these tools. I'll be surprised if they're not.
Hmm.
But you should really like officially enable them and get them using it. They will know how to best leverage the various GenAI tools in their environment. So build champions with the most powerful ones,
All
and they
right.
will benefit the most. Second, get the junior developers onboarded with guardrails. The biggest pain point, like I think your audience will relate to it, is you have new junior developers joining, a lot of energy, but a lot of questions also on the
Hmm.
code base,
Hmm.
and they normally have to ask the senior developers, right? Which is great mentoring experience, but also takes away time. GenAI can help a lot with that, right? So with guardrails, you can actually help junior developers do boiler code development much more better, or even like less of it, so they can focus now on problem solving. They can understand code bases that might be spanning multiple decades much more effectively versus
Hmm.
asking somebody, right? So those are I would say, the two starting points. The third thing is I will start, uh, the biggest um, thing that will prevent any companies adopting GenAI for software development effectively is context.
Uh-huh.
Now, now
What do you mean
context,
by that?
now context is basically like you and I share context. Maybe we went for breakfast, maybe we didn't, but
Sure.
and we went to the same school. We have a
Right.
lot of background knowledge that is common, so we can talk to each other and much more effectively, right? These GenAI models, they don't have context of the environment,
Hmm.
of the enterprise environment. They don't. They're not. They've been trained on internet data. They've been specialized for coding and so forth, but they don't know what your customer contact database looks like. They
Hmm.
don't, right? Especially if you have multiple applications that have been built that are not off the shelf. So, so providing context, we always talk about having context of the code base and how big a context window needs to be to understand the code base and things like that. But that's not sufficient. What we need to be able to do, and what enterprise need to do, is really adopt this MCP server and the tooling, because that provides a very deterministic and a precise way to access enterprise data,
And I think
enterprise.
we should sorry to interrupt. We should start MCP. I think it's a really hot idea these days. What does that stand for?
Yeah, so it's multimodal context protocol. So
Hmm.
basically, like if I had to, let me just like
Yep.
try to like simplify it a lot. Let's
Ure.
say I'm using some Gen AI model. Could be the 4.0 model, could be the Claude model, doesn't really matter, right? And I ask it, hey, can you please like write an application, and maybe I'd be more specific. Can you please like look at my customer contact databases and
Hmm.
look at all the outstanding invoices and send an email? Something you and I can have a conversation. You get my intent that I'm talking about. Hey, let's look at our customers. Let's look at all the outstanding invoices. Let's send them a reminder that if they're more than 90 days or something. Super
Hmm.
simple, right? And
Yep.
with these things have been solved many times before. Uh, but to do this now, the GenAI model needs to know two things: your list of customers, a different database for your invoices. Very simple logic to see if they're outstanding or not, and see if there are any exceptions where we should not maybe reach out to this customer or this vendor we should, right?
Hmm.
That is connecting to your enterprise systems. right? And the best way to do that is to provide a layer in between to do that. So we used to use APIs, and everybody uses APIs to do that.
Right.
So really, at the end of the day, is a way to get access to the various API endpoints in a managed fashion that the model can understand. So it
Let me,
uses markdown.
I think I understand. When you say a layer, do you mean it's provided by the API? What is the layer exactly?
So the layer tells which API to call to
Okay.
solve what kind of problem. So
All
the
right.
best thing they think about it is really a documentation layer on top of API with a bunch of other capabilities.
Gotcha.
As a
Okay.
model, I need to know, hey, if I need to look up a customer database, customer contact,
Hmm.
I can talk to the server say, hey, talk to this API endpoint, which will talk to this database, uses this protocol, and so forth. So now
Right.
I have more tools as an agent, as a model, and I can do my job much better. So the code I produce is much more effective than a generic internet trained code, right? So,
Mhm.
but this stuff is easy to incorporate now, right, within the enterprises. And I encourage customers to start doing that and thinking about what enterprise data to expose internally uh, to the teams that are using this GenAI technology. So empower your senior developers, get the best practices, make them the champion, get the junior developers also on ramp them with the guardrails,
Hmm.
start using things like MCPs, another way to kind of really enable these GenAI technologies to tap into your unique data sources. So those will be some of the things I'll encourage you to do that. But last thing is very important. Don't treat it as something different from your normal software development lifecycle.
Uh-huh.
For example, you hire a couple of new developers, you put up a development pod here, right? When they check in code, it still needs to go through testing,
Right.
right? It still needs to like when it goes through your CI/CD pipelines, the same process has to continue. Same thing here. So this thing just has to plug in to the DevOps aspects also of
Sure.
your software engineering, and that's easy to do. But don't treat it as something different. Treat it actually just like any other code that's being produced that still needs to be tested, maybe more effectively than even before,
Hmm.
and have a human in the loop, at least initially and probably for a long time, to kind of approve changes.
Oh, definitely. So the human in the loop is always an important element. I think that the challenge, and you've talked about that, but I want to get specific about the compliance, is that, what about the challenge of flexibility with AI and generative AI, which you want to give the developer some flexibility, but they have to create code and finish product within a framework that must deal with security and compliance concerns. I think you've talked about that with the human in the loop and making sure it's not too different, but is there anything else that people should really know about it's flexible, yes, but it is the framework for security and compliance.
Yeah. Look, before we get to security compliance, I think one other thing is super important to do. Like, we should not walk away from the best practices of software engineering,
Mm-hmm.
which first are devoid of code or writing code. It's actually capturing requirements extremely well.
Hmm.
So I say that because code is just an artifact of the problem we're trying to solve. And the problem we're trying to solve is best captured in some requirements documents, some spec documents, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's easy to say I'll just prompt away, but prompt is not capturing requirements or specs.
Hmm.
It's a way to instruct the machine. So I'll just encourage like all your audience members to make sure they're doing the work that they already should be doing of documentation of what the
Mm-hmm.
project's about, what the
Mm-hmm.
requirements are, what the problem is being solved. That context is super important and it has to be maintained.
Right.
And actually the reason I bring it up is because even if you save prompt, a bunch of prompts, you will not be able to easily understand what the problem the person is trying to do,
Hmm.
right? Just the best practices of documenting code and writing modular code and all the stuff, right? And requirements gathering. The requirements gathering stuff needs to happen, needs to be maintained. GenAI can help with that.
Mm-hmm.
Then use, I would say, like a spec-driven way to start developing code using GenAI, where you break the code into modules you're trying to solve, not just like a one-time make me an app. So
Right.
or the different steps, right? That steps then are just units. They're just different modules being produced, and they need to have the same, and the models you can actually now even run locally sometimes on the smaller models, but the best models, and where you want to use things like even Cloud Code, even Joule for developers that are offering, they need to be connected to the internet.
Right.
But they come with a lot of peace of mind that your data is not used to train larger models and things like that. So make sure whatever model you're using, whatever technology you're using, gives you those certainty and confidence that your data is treated confidentially.
Yep.
Then once the data is produced, you can better even instruct the data to be written, the program to be written in a particular way, like your previous programs are. They follow some best practices. These agents are really good at following instructions.
Hmm.
And then after they do that, run it through your regular testing. Gen AI, by the way, also helps with creating unit tests, by the way. But
Hmm.
then make sure it's going through your regular check-in, testing, publishing process itself.
Yeah. All right. So it's new, but it's not so new that the classic processes can be ignored.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
yeah,
I think.
makes perfect sense.
And
Yeah.
by the way, the only way this is going to scale is they need to fit into your classical processes. But the classical processes also need to evolve. We can talk about that. But the first need to fit into what you have instead of rehauling completely.
Well, I guess I'd like to get your sense of the future of generative AI software development in the enterprise. I think, a few milestones. I mean, obviously it's changing so quickly. I'm not sure anyone really knows the future, but I'd love to get, I mean, you're so close to the market, Bharat. I mean, what do you see for the future of generative AI software in the enterprise?
I think Bill Gates said it, right? It's easy for us to overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the longer term. I think it was
Hmm.
him.
Right.
But I think in Gen AI, I think we even underestimate in the short term what's going to
Really?
happen.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think a couple of things. First of all, the tooling aspects and the frameworks around Gen AI, I think they will mature. Let me be more precise. I spoke about, like the prompts are the only way we know to talk to these models. But are they the most effective UI,
Hmm.
right? And maybe for some developers when you're doing very diffs and all that stuff, but then even then, how do you can do version control of code. We should certainly be doing version control of prompts to see what produce what, but you know, the whole UI interface layer will change. It will evolve a
In,
lot.
in what way do you think?
I think we will learn. I think the industry is out there. We're learning. Like if you look at Claude Code, it has no UI. It's a CLI. You drop it in. It's being very effective. You use Cursor of the world or Joule for developers, right? We plug into VS Code and other things too. We
Right.
use the VS Code kind of infrastructure to kind of, but have a chat window on the side to do it, right? So I think we as the industry will be learning. I think what will happen, and this is just pure my prediction, can be totally off,
Sure.
is a couple of things. First, the focus on capturing intentions will be there. That right now is devoid. You want to do a separate document to capture that. That will
Hmm.
become an integral part of this thing. Second, higher level abstractions of the logical units of the software that you're developing will happen. But then you can click down and go to the code level. From the code level, if you make changes, the software abstraction will change will layer. This will allow, uh, design teams, product teams, business teams to work with the development teams much more effectively. Because now you're not looking, staring at a bunch of code, and that's the only thing you stare at. You'll be staring at different levels of abstraction, then we'll be able to go between those level of abstractions.
Okay.
So I think that's how some of the UI will change, because then you'll be kind of more focused on the problem I'm going to solve, how I'm going to decompose the problem, or the how we are going to decompose the problem working with Gen AI, and then the decomposed problem will have the ability to go deeper into code snippets as needed, right? So that's just my prediction, but I do think you'll have some abstraction from top and from bottom coming up, and you'll break this kind of issue we had back in the days of low code, where if I produce low code, there's no way for me to debug it.
Right.
If I was to go do code gen, then I can't go back to the business user or the non-technical user, or maybe not the professional developer who wrote the initial prototype, right? I think this will go back and forth. I think this is an area we will see a lot of change on the UI side. Or when I say UI, so how we interface
Hmm.
with these
Right.
development modules. I think the second one is I think the dev and the DevOps space will change.
Hmm.
Right now, if you look at and by the way, it's not, they're like two different islands,
Right. Sure.
but
They're together. Yep.
but I think you'll see a lot more of that. And this is a little bit more longer term than immediate short term. But as we get more confidence with the code that these agents are producing, as companies gain more confidence in the code they're producing for them, uh, they might be more just using product telemetry to see what's going on, change the code, test it, ship it, or automatically within guardrails, of course.
Uh-huh. Okay. So
But that
it'd be
is,
much faster then in that case.
yeah, you can almost think of autonomous development and maintenance, the CI/CD, or on steroids, or on
Right.
rocket ship, right? So
Yep.
much more faster iterative tools, and agents are working on your behalf,
Hmm.
warning when things go back. We're not there yet right now. We have a lot more checks and balances to be in place, and guardrails to be in place. But that I can see also. where the agents are looking at product telemetry, they're looking at usage information, and they're looking at what's where people are getting stuck, and they actually are doing their own A/B experiments and everything else. That I would say is a little bit longer term, but I'd love for the industry to move there because the problem we're trying to solve has not changed. How we're solving it now is not static; it's dynamically changing. If that makes sense.
Right, right.
I think that will be the second thing. And the third thing, which is I think is more short term, is you'll just see maturity of the MCP server. Like what happened in the A2A, in the API management space. We have a lot of APIs. Then you have this industry that come out for managing these APIs in
Sure.
a
Right.
secure fashion and lifecycle. You'll see that on the MCP A2A side and so forth. So I think that will happen very quickly.
Yeah, that seems like it's going to be a growing area, to be sure. Huh.
Yeah.
It's ripe for startups, actually, probably. Um,
And for
Brad,
an established company like us, dude, that's a big market.
well, one never knows.
Yes.
Brian, I think you said it. A lot of good stuff. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for sharing expertise, and please come back and talk with us again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.